Hi, welcome back. I'm Pam Hayes from Hayes Sewing Machine Company of Wilmington, Delaware. And today I'm going to show you a nice little quick, easy to piece, small, and it's a small quilt. So you can use it like as a table topper if you wanted to, or for something for kids, for a little baby quilt. Any of that would work just fine. It is what they call a charm pack, and it's the pattern called Stones. And a charm pack, if you're unfamiliar with it, it is a 5-inch square. So this particular one is really easy to piece. So I started out with my charm pack. Okay, it was a 5-inch square, and it was basically all the different colors that you see in. So it was all put together for me, didn't have to think too hard. And then we chose the background, which is the hot pink in this case. So what we need to do to cut this out is the size of the rectangles is 1.5 by 2.5. Okay, 1.5 by 2, it's on the pattern. And then the charm pack block, you actually need to cut it in half. So basically you need to have a rectangle. You want to end up with a rectangle that is 2.5 inches. All right, so I'm just going to do that with my ruler, count it off here. All right, so that's all you have to do for your charm packs. And you need to do this for 38 of the charm pack squares, and then you're going to cut them in half. We're basically going to end up with 75 little blocks, and you're going to sew them together in rows of 15. So basically I have 4 of the rows done, and the way I laid it out was according to the pattern. So you'll see how you have a kind of an interesting little secondary, it looks like a block from far away. Now, our piecing together of our design, of our block, is basically on one end we are going to take our rectangle, line up the background fabric that we cut, and if I was doing this, I would do it what we call assembly line style. Okay, so you're going to line it up and then you're just going to stitch it down. Basically, remember, you're going to be using your 1/4 inch seam allowance. So we're going to take it. So if I was doing it assembly line style, you see I'm just going to take and line up my next bit. All right? Then we're going to go and we're going to cut them apart. And when we press, we're going to be pressing towards the small rectangle. So when you press it, we're going to be pressing the seam towards the tall rectangle. Small rectangle, I should say, sorry. Alrighty. Alright, so now at this point, great land of doing it ahead of time. This is my final row. So remember, you're going to have 5 rows that have 15 each. So that's where we get 75. Even I can do that math. I had to think about it there for a second. When we line this up, you see we alternate. So we have the rectangle that we sewn on, opposite sides as you go. So I have done most of this, and then we're going to add basically this guy at the bottom. So we're going to take, and I want to make sure I have it lined up. So once you have done all of your 75, you're going to lay them out as you wish, and then we're going to sew these together. So I've done this one. And then the last one we're going to put on the end here is this one. So I want to make sure that I have it, don't flip it this way so it's the same. You're going to flip it so it's alternating. All right, so now I have 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14 rats. I thought it looked a little long. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14. Yeah, I have one too many. All right. Well, think about it, ladies or gentlemen. One too many is way better than not enough. So I got overzealous. So we're just going to I'm just going to double check 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14. Yeah, that's 16. I have 16 on here and I wanted 15, so we're just going to take one off. Now, once we are done this one, I have been putting the rows together and when we are putting the rows together, we want to make sure that we have alternated the seam allowances when we press them. So you'll see how I've been putting clips on the end. So if you take a look over here, these are basically my rows. So I have my 4th row, 3rd, 2, 1, and I'm going to add this one to the bottom. So I've been alternating how I press my seams. So on the one seam, all the seams for the blocks that I've sewn together vertically in this case, I press them towards the clips. Second row, I press it away, and then you can see we're going to alternate that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a look. I pressed this last row that I did away from the clip. So the row I have in my hand, I'm going to press towards the clip. All right. So come over to the ironing board. And the easiest way to do it, I kind of hold it up. Do it from the top. And I'm just going to make sure I have them at least started. And I'm going to be pressing them along the way. Kind of do it from the side of my iron. And this is also going to make sure I have it nice and flat. Now, I also take and I make sure I do it from the other side, make sure I have no stragglers, no little bit like this guy here kind of didn't flip for me. So I'm going to make sure that that's correct. All right, so we're looking for a row that's nice and flat. Okay. Now, we're going to unpin this. And I'm going to line up my row. And you can see what I'm looking for. I'm looking for getting it lined up. You see how I'm going for that secondary pattern that I have all the way along. Now on this guy here, when I'm working with this. You can take, I'm just going to flip this over so I have it. You can actually go and do just melding the two seams together. So you see I have one seam allowance pressed one way and one the other, and just leave it as such. And this is, let me show you what I did for the majority of what I was doing. I lined it up. I could feel the seam allowances, and I just sewed. And that'll work for pretty much all of them. Okay, so I'm going to show you what I do when I'm at home and my sister's not watching me. So see, I'm feeling it so that they are going together.
I'll admit, that's a lot of quilt tacks.
That's a lot of quilt tacks, yes. But I'm going to show you quilt tacks as well. But again, this is what I did at home. So I just make sure that they're kind of pushing together. Again, one seam allowance going one way, one the other. I just can kind of feel them. And if you were pretty close and pretty accurate in your piecing, it should probably go together pretty well for you. You shouldn't have to have two major. Alright, so you can see how this is all I'm doing. See how I'm just making sure that I'm butting them up together. And again, making sure that I can feel the seams butting up. Okay. And for the most part, that's probably going to work just fine for me. Yep, they're lining up well. Now, if the thought of getting a little off is just going to make you twitch, okay, we're going to do the proper quilt tack. And a proper quilt tack is basically when you take, and we're going to kind of, I'm just going to hold these guys together with my clip. You can do this with pins, it doesn't matter. Okay. Now, a quilt tack, you are basically going to stitch 2 or 3 stitches before the seam and 2 or 3 stitches after. Okay, and you would basically continue. I'm going to scooch this down. So you're just sewing basically across the seam. And then when I open it up, I can see there, and this one, that's close enough for me. Okay, and that's where you have to decide what you want to live with. I have a 3-foot rule. If it looks good from 3 feet, don't worry about it. But, you know, everybody's different. So, if you wanted, though, that 1/32 of an inch that it was off was just going to make you really unhappy, all you have to do is pull it. You're going to pull your threads, and then we can restart again. So let me do that one more time, just so you can see it. All right, right on the money. Now, at this point, if you notice that you have a little bulgy, okay, this guy here is a little bit bigger, do yourself a favor, put the bigger side down towards the feed dogs. That'll help pull it through. And we're going to line this up. And we're going to stitch across. because the one that was on top was a little bit bigger, or the one that was bigger, I put it underneath. See how I was just able to ease it in? When I press it, you see how you have a little bit of a ripple, not much, and honestly by the time you press it, nobody will ever know. And never tell, never tell. All right, so now I'm gonna go and I'm gonna give it a press one more time. All right, and voila, all done. Except we have 2 borders. Now the only thing I'll tell you for the borders, we've been kind of working with it this way, you know, the 15 going across. Then when I was reading the instructions for the borders, didn't quite make as much sense as I had thought. Okay, see how they have us working, going, you know, lining it across and then sewing the rows together. But see how they have now flipped it? So now we're looking at this. We were kind of sewing this way, weren't we? We were sewing, putting the strips across. And when you do the borders, you have it lined up this direction. So be aware when you're putting the borders on, and they talk about the sides and then the tops, be sure, take a look at the picture. You put the sides on first, but technically, you know, they've changed the orientation of it.
90 degrees.
90 degrees. So be aware that when you add those borders, and basically the borders that we're going to put on, and I won't bore you with sewing them in front of you. This is going to be one border, and that one's going to be the second one.
Pretty.
So it's going to be really sharp when we're all done. All right. So again, this is a very nice quilt when it's all done. It's not big. It's 36 by 38 roughly. So nice little kids quilt, nice table topper. You can always add to it, just cut more blocks. It's a nice simple quilt to do. And if you enjoyed it, I hope you have. Remember, 5-inch squares, charm packs is basically the basis of how to work with this. See ya.